Okay, this is my video recording of assignment 4 for week 7 in JavaScript. The first one, it says that I need to create programmatically a subtract a value, to create an array called ages that contain the following array, and then to subtract the value of the first element and the last element without using the index to do that. So here I created my array called ages. I passed the values that it was previously assigned, and um, I print that out to the console. As you can see here, the ages are printed out. Then I use uh, this variable to subtract the last element from the first element, and I print that out to the console. As you can see here, the result of the first one minus the first one, the last one and the first one, it is 90. Then I add um, another element, number 45, to the end of the array, and I print that out to the console so you guys can see it that it's been added. And then I use the same um, method as before. I use the variable to um, calculate or subtract to the subtraction, the difference of the last element and the first element. That is, this pin is being done dynamically. As you can see here, the updated result is 42. Then it says that I need to calculate the average of the ages using a loop. And for that, I create a variable, initiate the variable called sum, and I use the for loop to iterate through the ages. And then I create another variable called average to do the, the average, the division of the sum of the ages by the length of the ages. And then I print that out to console. As you can see here, the average age of the array is 30.55. Then in question number 2 says that I need to create an array called names that contain the following names, and that I need to use a loop to iterate through the array and calculate the average number of letters per name. And number B, I use another loop to iterate through the array again and concatenate all the names together separated by a space. So I declare the array with the names. Here I use another variable, the total letters, to use on my for loop um, to calculate the average number of letters per name. So I iterate through the names and I'll calculate the total letters. And then I declare another variable where I take the total letters of the names and divide it by the length of the array, and I print that to the console. As you can see here, the average letters per name is 3.83. And then I concatenate the names uh, with a space and without a comma. And I do that right here. Sorry, I apologize. Right here. And I use the trim method um, to remove the white space from the beginning to the end of a string to print that out. Then in question number 3, it says, how do you access the last element of an array? And I do that by uh, using the length method and subtracting -1. So that way it is dynamically. So if I was to add an element to my array, it will grab the last element dynamically and not just by index. And I print that out right here. It's 45. And then for the first element, I access it by index, and it gets printed out right here. Then in question number 5, it says create an array called name lengths and write a loop to iterate uh, over the previously created names array and add a length of each name to the name lengths. So I create an array called name lengths, and I use the for loop to go through the name lengths, and uh, I printed out the results to the console, where I take the name lengths and I push that to the end of the iteration, and it gets printed out right here, 1 to 6. Then in question number 6, it says write a loop to iterate over the name lengths array and calculate the sum of all the elements in the array. So I declare a variable sum of lengths, initiate that variable, and I use the for loop for that to go to iterate through the name lengths, and I calculate the sum of the lengths and the names by adding to each other, and then I print out the name lengths and the sum of the lengths to the console. As you can see right here, the name lengths is six elements on the array, and the sum of all of that is 23. Then in question number 7, it says write a function that takes two parameters, word and n, as arguments and returns a word concatenated to itself an n numbers of times. So and then it gives an example. If I pass the word hello and the number 3, it would expect it to print out 3 times the word hello. So for that, declare a function concatenated word has two parameters, and I use an arrow function for this that pass the two parameters word and n, and then I declare a variable inside the function, and then a for loop where I iterate through the array, and I return the results from that, and then I call it from a console. And as you can see here, it's been printed out 3 times. Then number 8, I says write a function that it takes two parameters, first name and last name, and returns a full name. The full name should be first and last name separated by a space. And with this, again, I use an arrow function where I pass the two parameters, first name and last name, and I call them, and I return them from the same function. And I use John Smith to when I call the function, and it gets printed out in console right here. Question number 9, it says write a function that it takes an array of numbers and returns true if the sum of all the numbers is greater than 100. And for this, I used a reduce method of the array with the purpose that gets applied to a function to each element of the array and returns a single value. So since I'm going to be adding the sum of all the numbers, I'm going to reduce it just a single value. And then I use this callback method sumNum on the arrow function with the purpose is because it's a callback function that is applied to each element of the array, and it takes two parameters, sum, which is accumulated result, and num, which represent the current element being processed. In each iteration, it adds the current element num to the accumulated sum. To reduce method, the reduce method is used to iterate over, like I explained before. So I use that in my function, and then I call it. Then it gets printed out here where it said I've given an explanation. The function will return true if the sum of the array of the numbers is greater than 100. And you can see right now, but it is the numbers that is being called right here, and it returns true. Then question number 9 says write a function that it takes an array of numbers and returns uh, the average of all the elements of the array. So I use again a similar arrow method that I used before, but this one, instead of comparing it to is greater than 100, I divide it by the number of the lengths of the number arrays and divided by it, so I can get the average, and it gets printed out right here, 20. Then number 11, it says write a function that takes two arrays of numbers and returns true if the average of the elements of the first array is greater than the average of the elements of the second array. So again, I create a function here where I pass two elements, uh, array 1 and array 2, or parameters, sorry, and then I return I use the calculate average method for the array if it's greater than the second average of the array. And then when I call it, the the function, I passed an array here, and it returns true since the first one is greater. Then the last one, it is says write a function that called will you buy a drink, that takes a boolean parameter and a number as another parameter. So I created again a function here where this is my boolean and this is the integer parameter, and return, and I says that if it is true, and if the value of the parameter is greater than 50, it will return true. And in this case, it returned true because when I call it and when I pass the values, um, it, it, it meets the criteria. And this has been my presentation.